Galvaron Interstellar Institute stood like a gleaming spine against the void, its segmented domes orbiting the gravity-neutral zone between two gas giants. It was here, beneath its titanium glass atriums and biometric locking chambers, that the future leaders of the galaxy were shaped. Only the most exceptional, the most elite, the most terrifyingly brilliant were admitted. Jace Carter didn't look like he belonged. Among beings that shimmered with bioluminescence, wore fractal carapace armor, or hovered on anti-grav fields, the human's plain gray uniform and unimpressive musculature gave him the aesthetic value of a dented cargo crate. He leaned back in his seat with a casual slouch that bordered on disrespectful, arms crossed behind his head, boots resting at an angle that gave full view of their scuffed soles. Across from him sat Instructor Zelik, a skeletal Authari whose mandibles clicked softly as he reviewed the day's assignment. He made no effort to hide the disdain on his chitin-plated face. "Today," he rasped, "you will encounter something instructive." A low hum of interest buzzed through the other students. Karzar, towering and furred, bared his fangs in anticipation. Luma, the aquatic diplomat, filtered water nervously through her gill pouches. Even the Avaxan, telepaths with notoriously fragile minds, quivered with curiosity. Jace yawned loudly. The display drew a sideways glance from Zelik. "You may find your apathy regrettable, Deathworlder. This is no simulation of economics or interspecies law. This is biological instruction." "Sounds fun," Jace said, voice lazy. "Will there be a quiz?" The instructor's mandibles twitched. "There will be an encounter." The class chamber was reconfigured mid-session. Transparent walls slid back with mechanical precision, revealing a tiered arena drenched in sterile white light. Patterns flickered along the floor, movement sensors, neural dampeners, energy-diffusing tiles. From above, a thick column descended slowly, pulsing with containment fields. "What is that?" whispered Luma. "An adaptive predator," answered Zelik. "Genetically engineered. Programmed with hunting data from over 300 worlds. Capable of mimicking scent trails and exploiting neural fear responses. You will not defeat it. You will merely survive." Karzar stood at once. "I will defeat it." "Unlikely," Zelik said. "You are not the target. All of you are." The containment column hissed. Gas vented. Inside the tube, something shifted. Its shape was indistinct at first, shadows bleeding into motion, limbs unfolding at odd angles. Scaled plates flexed over lean muscle. Its eyes, 6 of them, flickered with something disturbingly close to humor. Its breath fogged the contained glass, leaving behind a smear that almost looked like a grin. "Scanners indicate no projectile weaponry," Avaxan muttered. "No tech. Pure instinctual kill drive." Jace still hadn't moved. "Each of you will enter the chamber. One at a time," said Zelik. "Survive for 5 minutes. No weapons. No shields. No psionics beyond passive use. Begin." No one moved. The predator shifted again. Its claws clacked against the reinforced floor of the chamber like an impatient metronome. Karzar broke the silence with a growl. "I go first." He strode in without hesitation. The air shimmered as the containment field sealed behind him. At first, Karzar circled, testing footing. The predator mirrored him. Then it blurred, impossibly fast. A clash. A yelp. Karzar was flung backward into the wall, dazed but alive. The timer hadn't even reached 2 minutes. He limped out, blood matting his fur. "It learns." The next student hesitated longer. Then another. One collapsed from sheer panic before even entering. Another triggered the alarm when their vitals spiked. The predator never stopped adapting. Each round, it moved more fluidly, predicted movements faster, struck with chilling precision. And still, Jace remained still. By now, even Zelik looked uncertain. "Human, your turn." Jace stood, cracking his neck. "About time." He stepped into the chamber, without fanfare. No psych-up routine. No aggressive display. Just a slow, steady pace. The field snapped closed. The predator noticed immediately. It lowered its stance, a ripple of intent passing through its body, like a coiled spring ready to explode. Jace didn't flinch. Instead, he crouched, unwrapped something from his sleeve, a thin foil wrapper, and crumpled it audibly. Then he dropped it to the floor. The sound echoed oddly. The predator's ears twitched. Jace pulled a small thermal patch from inside his boot. Activated it. The faintest whine emitted. And still he didn't move. The predator began to circle him, cautious now. It paused once, sniffed the air, and hesitated. Its 6 eyes narrowed. Then, without warning, Jace shifted. 1 step forward. A low growl escaped his throat. Not loud, not primal, just deliberate. Predatory. The creature froze. What's he doing? Luma whispered from behind the glass. Establishing dominance, someone muttered. No, Zelik murmured. He's bluffing. Inside the chamber, Jace crouched lower, hand inches from the floor. The predator lunged. Jace moved. The thermal patch struck the ground mid-step, the wrapper thrown directly at the beast's snout. It recoiled in confusion, then howled, spasming, its nerves suddenly flooded by the compound Jace had smeared on the foil, a stinging alkaloid native to Earth. Not lethal. Not even banned. Just unexpected. The creature hit the floor, twitching. Not unconscious. Just unwilling. The timer beeped. Jace straightened, brushed dust from his uniform, and walked to the door. He passed Zelik without a word, but then paused. You said it was programmed to exploit fear. Yes. Well, he said, glancing back at the beast, maybe you should have programmed it to recognize a bigger predator. Then he left. And for the first time since the Academy's founding, the silence that followed was not reverent, but afraid. The debrief room was colder than before, psychologically, not thermally. The kind of cold that crept up your spine not because of temperature, but because of what people were not saying. Jace sat at the far end of the observation deck, his reflection ghosting across the one-way glass. Below, the predator was curled tightly in the corner of its containment pen, breathing shallowly, gaze locked on nothing. Instructor Zelik stood several feet behind him, unusually silent. The other students clustered together across the room, deliberately keeping distance from both Jace and the observation window. No one laughed. No one whispered. Even Karzar, bruised but still proud, stole only a brief glance at Jace before looking away again. The silence fractured with a cough. Not from Jace. From the Avaxan. I felt it, they said, voice shaky. In the chamber. When you moved. Your emotional resonance spiked. But it wasn't fear. It was intention, Jace said, not turning around. Yes, the Avaxan confirmed quietly. Predators broadcast threat displays. But you didn't display anything. You simply decided. Jace didn't answer. He didn't need to. A soft hum broke the tension as Zelik activated the holoscreen. A replay of the chamber encounter began, slowed to frame by frame, the foil wrapper falling, the thermal patch igniting, the predator's lunge, and the human's unblinking calm. The screen froze mid-motion. Every muscle in the beast's body coiled with violence. Jace stood with one foot planted forward, balance perfect, hands relaxed. Not defensive. Inviting. Luma finally spoke, voice a trembling ripple. That creature was engineered to override logic. It mimics fear responses and amplifies them. But it hesitated when it saw you. Because I wasn't afraid of it, Jace replied. Zelik's mandibles clicked once. That is not a sufficient answer. Jace finally turned. His eyes were sharp now, no longer the lazy, amused gaze he wore earlier. You wanted us to respond as prey. You didn't think a predator would trigger a predator. Zelik narrowed his eyes. You are not a predator, human. Your species classifies as omnivorous opportunists. High risk tolerance, yes, but no specialized anatomical tools for predation. No claws, no fangs, Jace agreed. But we have hands. And fire. And stories about things worse than us. That last sentence lingered in the air. From the corner, Karzar growled softly. Stories do not kill. No, Jace said. But they teach us how. The holoscreen shifted again. A new angle, thermal scan, showed the predator's heat signature flaring with adrenaline. Then, as Jace advanced, the temperature at its spine dropped. A stress response. Submission. The beast's nervous system, recognizing an apex threat, had instinctively prepared for death. This isn't just about you stunning it, Zelik said slowly. It recognized you as a superior entity. The implication landed like a weight. Every species in that room had a psychological hierarchy built into them: prey and predator, fight and flight, dominance and submission. And somehow, a species from a blue and green death world had trained itself to ignore those instincts. Luma glanced at Jace, eyes wide. Your planet, is it really that dangerous? Jace didn't smile. We're not top of the food chain because we're the strongest. We're there because we're the most determined not to stay at the bottom. Then why are you even here? Asked the Avaxan, half in awe, half in dread. Jace looked at them, expression unreadable. To learn, to adapt, maybe even to play nice. The holoscreen blinked off. For a moment, no one spoke. Zelik turned toward the central console and addressed the system. Simulation records, timestamp, and neural telemetry classify as restricted. Access only to Level 4 instructors and interspecies council. Jace raised an eyebrow. Trying to keep me a secret now? The O3's stare was flat. You may not be the anomaly. You may be the template. And if that's true, humanity isn't ready for the rest of the galaxy, or the galaxy for humanity. There it was. The shift. The central conflict no longer revolved around a test or an experiment. It was now about containment, control, or perhaps fear. Karzar rose and approached slowly, tail swishing. I underestimated you, human. I believed your species soft. Adaptable, yes, but without edge. He paused, then gave a shallow bow. I was wrong. Jace offered no response. Zelik gestured toward the door. Dismissed. Except you, Carter. The others filed out quickly, glancing back once or twice, but offering no further words. Once alone, Zelik stepped closer to the window and looked down at the now docile predator. You improvised a chemical deterrent using a food wrapper, trace minerals, and a thermal patch. That wasn't protocol. Jace shrugged. Wasn't a protocol situation. I reviewed your reaction time. It exceeded standard combat reflexes. I don't freeze when I'm scared. I focus. Zelik turned to him slowly. What scares you? Jace didn't blink. Irrelevance. The words sat like a puzzle in the O3's mind. You're not here to learn how to survive, Zelik said quietly. You're here to measure what the rest of us would do when you stop pretending. Jace stood. You think I'm pretending? The instructor's mandibles flicked once. No. I think humanity is pretending. Jace walked to the exit, but paused at the threshold. I didn't come here to start anything, but if someone else does? Zelik asked. Jace glanced back. Then they'll find out the hard way that you don't test a species that taught itself how to hunt things bigger, faster, and smarter, and then made movies about it for fun. And then he left. The door closed behind him with a soft hiss, but the weight of his presence lingered. Below, the predator didn't move. Not from sedation. From memory. The tribunal chamber was built for grandeur. High vaulted ceilings carved from asteroid crystal-caught starlight and refracted it into shifting rainbows. 13 seats rose in a crescent around the central platform, each one occupied by a delegate from a different species, cold-eyed, heavily robed, and deeply unsettled. At the heart of the room stood Jace, hands at his sides, face calm. Not defiant, not submissive, just unreadable. Ambassador Threx of the Volari clicked his mandibles and leaned forward. Cadet Carter, we are not here to punish. This is a review. We require clarity on the events of Simulation 41. You've seen the footage, Jace said evenly. We've seen the results, added Counselor Ilef, a translucent-skinned Carthani whose race evolved in complete darkness. What we do not understand is why the predator ceased attacking. It should have escalated. Jace's gaze drifted to the empty space beside him. The predator's enclosure had been moved off-station for analysis. In truth, it hadn't moved since the incident. Vital signs normal. Muscle reflexes intact. But mentally? Frozen. Something about its encounter with Jace had carved a new behavioral path. One no biotechnician could explain. It saw something it wasn't programmed to understand, Jace said at last. Something that made it choose submission over combat. You're saying it made a choice? Ilef asked. Jace didn't smile, but his voice turned razor thin. Everything with a brain makes choices, especially when it knows it's been outmatched. Counselor Tyrix, a massive being encased in a liquid-filled mech suit, rumbled disapproval. You do not look like a predator. No, Jace agreed. That's the trick. The council shifted collectively, some murmuring in untranslated tongues. Zelik stood to the side, silent until now. When he spoke, his words carried weight. This was not an accident. The human calculated risk, improvised with minimal tools, and executed a maneuver that would terrify most apex life forms. This is not instinct. This is doctrine. And what doctrine is that? Ilef asked sharply. Human doctrine, Zelik replied. Control the fear. Then use it. The chamber quieted. Across the galaxy, the concept of fear held different values: warning sign, ancestral memory, biological restraint. But on Earth, it was something else entirely. A weapon, a challenge, a crucible. Jace looked up at them, letting silence stretch like a blade. You wanted to test us. You've been testing us since first contact. Always watching, always probing, wondering where we fit in your little pyramid of prey and predator. No one refuted it. But humans didn't evolve on a pyramid, he continued. We evolved in the chaos. We didn't get to specialize. We had to improvise. That's our evolutionary advantage. Adaptability, Threx said quietly. No, Jace corrected. Unpredictability. A pause. Zelik stepped forward again. We must decide whether humanity is suited for continued interspecies integration, or whether such potential for dominance must be contained. That word hung heavy, contained. Jace didn't flinch. That's your call. But ask yourself one thing before you try to put Earth in a cage. What happens when you corner something that's survived being hunted by its own planet for 100,000 years? Tyrix shifted, liquid sloshing. Are you threatening the council? No, Jace said. I'm reminding it. The tribunal recessed. Jace was escorted out of the chamber, not in chains but under watch. No one trusted him now. Not really. Not even the species who had once invited humans into their alliances, eager to mine Earth's brutal history for strategic insights. That history had just looked back at them. Hours later, in a more secure chamber far from the tribunal, Zelik recorded a private log. His mandibles clicked softly as he spoke. Subject: Human Cadet Jace Carter. Observation: Emotional state controlled under pressure. Reaction time exceeds baseline for known species. Displays nonverbal threat posturing outside of programmed expectations. Successfully deterred apex predator through psychological warfare and chemical improvisation. Recommendation: Elevate human classification from Deathworlder to category indeterminate. Potential threat level. He paused, then leaned closer. Existential. A soft chime interrupted. A secure message pinged onto the hollow panel. It was from Earth. A line of text, brief and unnervingly calm. He didn't even show his full hand. Zelik stared at it for a long time. Elsewhere, in his private dormitory, Jace stared up at the artificial stars projected on the ceiling. His fingers tapped an idle rhythm against the bed frame. The predator's eyes had haunted him too, in a way. Not because they were dangerous. Because they were familiar. Earth had shaped him, yes. But it had also warned him. If you ever stop being dangerous, you stop being alive. And now, across the stars, that rule still applied. He smiled faintly, not out of pride, but recognition. They had introduced a predator into the class. But they'd forgotten one crucial rule. Never assume the human isn't the apex.